What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Comm Chatter. Today, I'm flying with some people from a completely different galaxy. They're coming all the way over from the Zyxx quadrant. I'm joined today by Jeremy Bint and Shane O'Connell from Mission to Zyxx. How are you both?
Doing good.
Doing great. Thanks for having us. This is exciting.
I'm very excited. This is Mission to Zyxx is genuinely my favorite podcast of all time.
Thank you.
There's a lot of Star Wars in it, so
There is a lot of Star Wars.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I try to talk you guys up a lot, but if you could, why don't you just give everyone a quick elevator pitch on what Mission to Zyxx is?
The shortest possible pitch that I throw out for Mission to Zyxx is like sort of improvised Futurama. It's a comedy show. It's about sci-fi, specifically like Star Wars, Star Trek is sort of the main DNA of it, but also we've done some very weird sci-fi stuff as well. Like last season we had a Power Rangers episode that was really like maybe one of my favorite episodes we've ever recorded. But all of it sort of coming from a perspective of like, we love this stuff, but a lot of it is very silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think another thing that makes the show unique is that it's improvised but like heavily edited. So we'll improvise for like 2 hours or so, and then Alden or Seth or Jeremy, who are performers on the show, will cut it down to like a 30 to 45-minute episode and then hand that to me, and I will do as much sound design as possible.
I definitely wanted to point out the sound design because, yes, I think it makes it very special.
I think without the sound design, our show would be not very good.
Well, I don't know about that, but
it's kind of a shame to say. But
yeah, so Shane, what is it like to carry the show completely?
I'm tired, man. It's going to be burden. Ooh, I love the dockyards. I haven't really played since the B-Wing came into play. Is anybody playing as the B-Wing right now?
Oh, I'm not, but it's interesting.
X-Wing all the way.
Now's a good time to try it when you're playing against AI because it's not the best ship when you're playing against people. It's very slow.
It's very hard to maneuver as well, right? So
yeah. You know what you're talking about. So I mean, let's just we're going to talk about Zyxx a lot more, but I mean, I always kind of open up the show with some very Star Wars questions. So what was what level of fandom are you both at with Star Wars? Are you fans or?
I'm a Star Wars Explained subscriber level fandom. So especially between episodes 8 and 9, I was going through some of your videos about like Darth Plagueis and stuff, trying to see if my theories about episode 9 would come true.
Yeah,
they did not.
I don't think none of mine did either. So
no.
Yeah. I would say I'm a fan. I was truthfully, and this might be sacrilege on this podcast, but I grew up way more of a Trek guy than a Wars guy.
There's no judgment here.
But I do like Star Wars a lot, and I definitely, honestly, for me as a young person, the oh boy, I just flew into a solid surface, which is not wise. My fandom of Star Wars as a young person was largely through the video games, especially X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, one of the all-time great like space sim video games. It rules.
Well, that's perfect for what we're doing right now.
Yeah, that is honestly the only reason I'm like passably good at this game is like I spent hours of my youth playing. Now I'm like, man, I'm way better against AI. It's so much different. It's like I've already killed like 3 ties. I'm like, this is much better.
That's what I figured. We'd start out with a nice chill match.
Yeah, I can handle. This is a speed I can play at. When I'm playing a dogfight against live humans, I am terrible.
How about you, Shane? Did you get into the video games growing up, or?
I did, yeah. X-Wing versus TIE Fighter was a big one for me, which is why I wanted to play this game. I haven't really been much of a gamer in my adult life, but I ended up buying a PS4 and PSVR just to fulfill my childhood dream of sitting in the cockpit of an A-wing.
Right? Yeah.
But I'm not doing VR now, and I have my rig set up in a weird way where I'm not using I'm using like a HDMI capture, so I think there's a little latency on what I'm doing right now. So this is an interesting way to try to play this game.
Yeah, the VR has been great, but did you guys get into any other Star Wars games growing up, or was it all about the flight sims?
Ooh. Did I get into any other Star Wars games?
It was mostly the flight stuff for me. I was like a aviation dork as a kid.
Cool.
So it was either a Star Wars flight sim or just a regular straight up flight sim that I'd be playing.
I was not a child at this point, but when I was in college, Knights of the Old Republic came out.
Yeah.
And Knights of the Old Republic is like, that's one of those games you play, and it came out, I think, between prequel 2 and 3.
Empire's got another thing coming.
I think you're right. I think it was 03.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And you literally were like, why are the movies so bad? And like, well, it's just like the story of the movies is like yawn, and the story of this game rules. It's so good. And you're like, why do they not understand that is what people want? It was like really weird to me that a game could be a more satisfying Star Wars experience than an actual like big budget movie. It made no sense to me.
What's interesting, I've been saying that of the stuff that's come out more recently, like I've enjoyed the movies, but
I don't. Yeah.
But for the new canon era, my favorite Star Wars stories have been like the books, the comics, the video game Jedi Fallen Order. That's my favorite thing they've done in the past few years.
I played it earlier this year, which is to say last year. It was great. What a great idea for a story, well executed, like significantly better than the last Star Wars movie they put out. Of course, my opinion. I don't mean to yuck anybody's yum in regards to Star Wars, but
yeah, we try to make sure everyone feels comfortable liking whatever they like in Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't want to. If you enjoyed Rise of Skywalker, great, but I think the story of Fallen Order was significantly more compelling.
I completely agree.
I never played it. What is it about?
It's on PS4, Shane. If you want a very fun Star Wars game, you are a Jedi apprentice, a Padawan, if you will. I know the lingo, so.
Impressive.
Yeah. You're a Padawan who like escaped Order 66. Like your master was like, get out of here.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you're just like working on a trash planet. I just got crushed.
Here I come.
And your buddy like falls. This is like the first 5 minutes of the game. I'm not spoiling anything. And you use the Force to save his life, and then like almost immediately these like Sith Inquisitors show up, and you're like, oh, I've made a huge mistake. And so you then end up on this quest to like find these like Jedi holocrons and stuff, and it's just like it's trying to like beat back the Empire and reconnect with the rebellion and whatever surviving Jedi might exist, as basically a Padawan with no master, and it's really good.
Cool.
It's very good. What would you say is your favorite Star Wars story? If it is a movie or a game, or it could be literally anything.
I'm a pretty basic guy. I'm all about Empire.
That is the most common answer, but that's fine.
But The Mandalorian is doing a great job. I think that the way that they've taken the ingredients of Star Wars and remixed them just like the right amount, I think, to like be arguably a little fan service heavy, but I think that they captured the spirit of Star Wars better than any recent thing, I feel like.
I agree with the fan service comment, but I'm also like, I don't care. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, same.
Favorite story. I really do love the story of what do you call it? He says as he flies into a structure and explodes, of Knights of the Old Republic. I just think that's such a good, fun story, and like the characters were really cool. You know, you put together your crew and everything. I did like that a lot, but ultimately I think I'm probably a New Hope guy. I recently, a year ago when live improvisation was possible,
Right.
I was teaching a class at the Upright Citizens Brigade in New York, which was called the Improvised Hero's Journey, where we took the like Joseph Campbell myth structure and used it as a basis for an improv show.
Missile inbound.
A lot of the times when I was like explaining, like, here's like what this step in the journey represents, is like Star Wars is a great example because everybody knows Star Wars, and also it conforms really, especially New Hope, to that structure really tightly. So you can use like almost every part of the movie somehow as like, oh well, this is this or like this is the I'm completely blanking on every step of the hero's journey of like this is like the ultimate boon, and this is the, you know, meeting with the goddess and like all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so it held that, and like Lord of the Rings were the ones our class usually were like, oh, what is this step all about? And it's like, okay, so remember in Star Wars when this happens.
Yeah.
But it made me appreciate of like, that's part of the reason, you know, A New Hope is so good, is that it has a super satisfying structure, you know?
Yeah, and like a universal one that
one
everyone relates to.
It's very identifiable, but it's also like satisfying in that way.
It's
Well,
also an
that's-
example of a movie that was where like the technical aspects of the movie can't really be overstated as to like how it was a successful film. Like there are all these stories about like the original cut of Star Wars being, you know, essentially unwatchable. And it wasn't until like a dedicated editor like whipped it into shape, and then also just the sound design and the visual effects do so much of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Like I have this fantasy that like if I had a ton of money, I would somehow find a bunch of competent VFX and audio effects people who have never seen Star Wars, and just give them like the, you know, raw cut of the movie without any of those effects, and just see what would the effect be on the movie if somebody who wasn't, you know, a genius like Ben Burt or the Industrial Light and Magic team. I feel like without them, it could have ended up like any of the other sort of cheap, uninteresting looking stuff of the same era, like sci-fi properties that were coming out.
Yeah, it is worth pointing out that like a lot of my affection for Star Wars comes from like, you know, I've watched them as an adult, and it's like those movies are almost 45 years old at this point. And like, I got mash buttons, I got ion cannon, and like they still look really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I mean, basically my entire adult nerd life has been railing against shitty CGI. Like, I just think it looks terrible.
Yeah.
And every time I see it, I'm like, why would you do this? Like, just do practical effects. Like a sci-fi movie I'm a huge fan of is Fifth Element.
Nice.
And like, if you know anything about the production of Fifth Element, is that it got made literally like 6 months before everyone just did CGI for everything. And there's some CGI in the movie, but it's very, very little. And I, I think if it had been made slightly later and was all CGI effects, I don't think it would be as popular. And that might be totally wrong, but I sincerely believe that to be true.
Do you have any favorite? This is a question I love to ask people. What's your favorite like C or D list character in Star Wars? Someone that maybe you think is you might be the world's biggest fan of this character.
Oh boy. No, Shane, you can.
No, I'm thinking. Do you have anybody in mind?
So I do know. The other big part of my Star Wars fan, the reason I know anything about Star Wars is my best friend in high school, this guy Mike Francina, who was a concept artist for Blizzard and did like a lot of designs for Diablo 3. He was a huge Star Wars fan, and we would quote Star Wars to each other all the time. There were certain characters we would just quote, even though like they're barely part of the movie. We loved to quote like rebel pilots who just had really distinctive voices. Like when Biggs is like, "Luca, are you all right?" Like he has such a weird inflection on it that would always make us laugh. So we would say that to each other all the time. We love to quote Jack Porkins, a classic goofball of a character.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I quote Porkins quite a bit. Stay on target. Stay
on target.
I mean, playing this game with friends, that's basically all we do. We say the same 8 things to each other, and we laugh every time.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta.
Now, Jeremy, do you know anything about my fandom? I have to ask because of your answer.
No, I don't.
Biggs is genuinely my favorite character.
Oh, really?
That's my answer.
Gotta love Biggs.
Yeah, my dog was named Biggs. I have a shrine of like as much merch as I could find of him. There's a picture back there of me meeting the guy who played him, Garrick Hagan.
That's fantastic.
That's
I was generally not aware of that, but I love that. You've got a fellow Biggs head in the house right now.
Also, Salacious Crumb.
There you go.
Salacious Crumb,
He's
always
great.
a winner.
And the Wolfman guy. What's his deal?
Lax Sivrak.
Yes. He didn't make the special editions, right?
I know. I never understood that.
I feel like that was like a stressed out production designer that was like, "Oh, we need another alien for this scene."
He was like, Wolfman. We
got this mask.
costume.
What is it about Salacious Crumb?
The voice.
Yeah, the laugh.
The best, yeah. It just
Excellent voice. Excellent laugh. You have to respect it.
And also, one of our favorite Zyxx episodes features a guest who plays a Salacious Crumb type character. The crew goes to what's essentially Jabba the Hutt's palace, and the Salacious Crumb character played by Drew. What's Drew's last name, Jeremy?
Drew Johnston. Well, I would argue that Drew is more of a Bib Fortuna in that episode.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. Because
Which one
Salacious Crumb is just a little guy who sits on his thing and goes like, "Wah!" and just like laughs, right? That's Salacious Crumb.
Yeah, I feel like
he's sort of
Drew
a combo.
Yeah,
really.
he's a combo because his voice is very similar to Salacious.
His voice is very Salacious Crumb. But Bib Fortuna is the Twi'lek who like actually seems to negotiate for Jabba,
Right.
and then Luke mind controls, and then Jabba's like, "You dummy."
Yeah.
Just like one of the best things about Star Wars is that some people just are not vulnerable to the Force, and when they watch it happen to people, are like, "What are you, an idiot?"
Sorry, I tried to focus for a second, but
We gotta get this a Star Destroyer, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So, when you were developing Zyxx, I want to start shifting into the podcast now, but was it a conscious decision to have it very Star Wars inspired?
So, I mean, the true irony about this is that you were talking to Shane and I about Star Wars, whereas Alden, who plays Plek on our show, and Winston, who plays 1,000 characters, but also AJ, are such hardcore dyed-in-the-wool Star Wars fans.
Yes.
And that, like, they are not here talking about it is insane. But they don't play the game, so that's their loss. So I think from their perspective, it was always like, yeah, we got to mess around with Star Wars stuff as much as we can. And I always think, like, when you're doing, like, we're not doing a specific parody of Star Wars, but we are doing a parody of so many things that, like, Star Wars is, or like Star Wars is so close to that, like, you almost have to. How do I? Oh, yeah, that's it. Okay, front shields only, please. Sorry, I just figured out how to do that again. And I'm like, let's do this.
Yeah, I think the first big sort of like, oh, this is sort of like the big idea for the show came in season 1, where we sort of realized that the crew would think that they're working for the Federation in Star Trek. Then it would be revealed that they were actually working for the evil Empire in Star Wars. So we don't start really hitting the Star Wars stuff until our version of Ben Kenobi comes in season 1, who is played by the hilarious Justin Tyler, and he plays old Durf, who is like a completely insane version of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, it's sort of like if Obi-Wan had been played by like
Gary
like Gene
Busey
Hackman or somebody, where he's like, why are you always whining about everything? Which would be a fun direction, but it's sort of like he's Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he has zero patience for anybody.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not dead.
What would you say is your favorite Star Wars homage that you've done?
Ooh,
If you have one that just stands out.
That one, the one Shane mentioned, where we, which is I think season 2, episode 2 with Drew, where we do like a big Jabba thing, is really, that is I think one of our best Star Wars pastiche sort of episodes. Man, what?
In season 2, I got really into the idea of trying to do an audio version of the the X-Wings checking in kind of scenes. So one of my favorite scenes in the season 2 finale is there's like just this little cutaway as the fighters are going to engage what is essentially the evil Empire, of all of them checking in, and Jeremy plays one of the pilots, and they're all checking in with just like the most ridiculous colors. They're like chartreuse leader checking in.
And we also have one of my all-time favorite gags on the show, which is Goofy Voice Squadron, or Squeaky Voice Squadron.
The Squeaky Voice Squadron,
which is just a bunch of guys being like, Squeaky Voice Squadron, check it in! And it's like a whole squad of guys who just have really absurd voices. And there's no reason to do that joke other than like,
fun voice.
That is a real joke born out of like, man, my favorite part of Star Wars growing up was the fact that when they checked in, some of their voices were real weird.
Oh, but for a full episode, the Core Belvor episode.
Core Belvor, yeah, that might be. So that's season 3, right?
Yeah, episode 18.
Yeah, we encounter essentially the like Darth Maul of the Zyxx universe.
Yeah.
And his name is Core Belvor.
With a hardcore name.
Yeah, and like Darth Maul, everyone's like, wow, he's kind of awesome. AJ, Winston's character in particular, gets really obsessed with how cool he is. and like writes him a little theme song. But he's sort of Darth Maul and Darth Vader, because you find out that not only has he been replaced, he has a bunch of like mechanical parts. It turns out all of him, except for I think his eyebrows, are like he literally had his torso shot out by a machine that shoots cybertronic torso, so it just like knocked it straight out of his body. It's like so stupid.
Yeah, there's a scene where they kind of engage in a philosophical discussion about what makes a cyborg, and it becomes clear that like it's a stretch for Core to characterize himself as a cyborg, because at this point literally every part of his body except
like,
for his
what
eyebrows
about him is in any way organic.
Yeah.
Being tractor beamed by a Star Destroyer.
Well, that is always just... I don't know why I get excited every single time, but like when I realize, oh, they're doing Mustafar, or yeah, they're doing a Sith Lord, or the first time AJ showed up and I was like, oh my god, they're doing Finn but with a Clint. It's always so much fun.
I mean, the Clints, are a really obvious Stormtrooper rip, but it's like there's so much weird stuff about Stormtroopers that I'm glad we got to play around with. Like, okay, great, so it's like now we have a defected Stormtrooper, and then also we haven't really explored this all that much in the show, but at some point in season 2, the like genetic source of all the Clints got replaced with Plek DNA, and so now there's all these what we call Plints around, and they're really bad at their job. And we sort of haven't referred to the fallout that actually has on the Zyxx universe, but it'll come up one day.
Well, that's something that like you guys also kind of have your own canon that I think, I mean, you try to keep it consistent. Like, you have a wiki page, but
we do. Yeah.
I mean, what is it like dealing with that when you are literally making everything up and it gets so weird?
It gets harder and harder. Yeah. Like, I'm sort of like the last line of defense on canon stuff, because I'm the only one who really hears the episodes as, the edited episodes, where the editors will sometimes like lose track of what's canon, what's not, because they've heard the unedited stuff and don't totally remember what gets cut out. But we work incredibly hard to try to just like maintain consistency in the canon, and we'll often like go back and do pickups if it contradicts something. The other thing is that like a lot of our guests, the vast majority of our guests, aren't super familiar with the show before they hear it, yet all the choices they make impact the overall canon, right? So like there are things from some of the first episodes that a guest just sort of threw out almost as like throwing a wrench into the works of our show that we've just stuck with. Like the Jar Jar Binks of our world is a sentient being who was just like a guest pitch in like episode 7 or something.
Yeah.
And that character has become arguably like the most important thing in our universe.
Just like Jar Jar Binks.
Yep. He's the key to all this.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
go ahead.
I always, I mean, to talk about Old Durf again, that's kind of who I always bring up, because I'm like, they make up all of their lore as they go, and so you bring in Old Durf and he introduces their version of the Force, and then it's like the fresh side and the whack side, and that's it now.
Yep.
That's how it is. Yeah. We've had to deal with how stupid that is for many seasons now. Season 3 we went really hard on the Zimas, who are the sort of Jedi of the Zyxx universe, and we like introduced them, and then you kind of find out like they're all like just totally useless. Which was very fun for us. I play a Zima master by the name of Kia Rondo, named after, of course, the affordable automobile.
Did not know that.
That is like, some people got that joke immediately, and then some people are like, "What's the joke?" And Kier Rondo is like, he's a Zima master, and he is just obsessed with like audio fidelity is like his thing. He has the power to like manipulate sound.
Yeah,
so,
well,
like,
everyone has. They're the chosen one.
the
of,
chosen
like,
one of X
this very
or Y
specific
or
thing.
whatever. Yeah. And so Kier Rondo is like the chosen of like manipulating sound, and it's very, very silly.
It kind of dawns on me.
Here it is.
There's a. I feel like I bring this quote up on my channel all the time now, but Taika Waititi said that Star Wars doesn't take itself seriously, but it believes in itself. And I mean, I think that you guys do exactly that same thing, where, yeah, you make the most absurd choices, but you treat them like they matter, and it shows, and it works so well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's sort of something we think about a lot too. That like, it's always really fun to do satire and make fun of things, but it cheapens it if you have too much of like a emotional distance from it, if that makes sense. You know, like taking it seriously is such a huge part of sci-fi in general that we'd be doing like a disservice to the show if we were to, you know, if we were like constantly snickering about, you know, whatever thing we're parodying.
I mean, we are constantly snickering, but usually about like just getting obsessed with dumb stuff.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I think if you're laughing at your own universe, it feels really disingenuous. But if you're laughing at like how stupid the stuff you're doing within the universe you're taking seriously is, then I think you're in a good place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a very subtle distinction. But I for me, it's like, that's the difference. This is going to be a real comedy hot take. That's the difference between like the like early Simpsons and like Family Guy. And not to like shit on Family Guy, but I don't think Family Guy has as much care for its universe as the Simpsons did. You know, where they actually cared about what happened to the characters. They still were insane and did lots of like silly things, and it was still like a sitcom, but they had more affection for the world than Family Guy did.
Yeah.
I'm ready for Family Guy fans to chew me out for this.
Hey, we're not Family Guy explained. You should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy. Not a podcast I think I would bother with.
Shane, when you're working on the sound design, have you ever found any creative ways to make nods to Star Wars that maybe people haven't noticed?
Yes, like I take the sound design too seriously and end up burying little inside jokes that I will only notice in almost every single episode. But I'm like such a huge fan of Ben Burtt. I think he is a genius. He's the sound designer of Star Wars. For those of you who don't know, like the fact that like he invented just like these unbelievably iconic sounds, like when you're pretending to wield a lightsaber, you're doing the sound, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're you know, playing with a TIE fighter toy, you're going to do the scream. So whenever I'd be looking ahead at the episodes that were coming down the pike, I would I spend extra time on anything that's going to be a direct reference to Star Wars or like a sound, right? So our version of the lightsaber is a wood saber, which is essentially just a stick.
Right.
And for the first season and a half, it doesn't really do anything. It's literally a stick.
Just
and
a
then
stick, yeah.
and then in our universe, the crew goes and meets what is essentially our version of Rey. Like
I love that character.
Marf is very
Rey/Ariel.
yeah.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
And Marf is the first one that gets the the wood saber to, you know, glow and start making sounds. And earlier in that episode, her whole deal is she's sort of a hoarder who runs like a junk shop, and she has a collection of tubes.
She's like a nice Watto.
Yeah. And you know those like carnival toys, those like noise making tubes? Like the way I ended up doing the wood saber sound was making a loop of the what sound. Oh, sorry, my cat just jumped on the keyboard. And then performing it in the same way that Ben Burt did. So the way Ben Burt does the lightsaber stuff is that he has a speaker that's playing. Cat, what the hell are you doing? Get the hell out of here. That's playing a loop of like an electronic hum sound, and then uses a microphone as the lightsaber, and as you wave it in front of the speaker, it will do that Doppler effect that makes it sound like the lightsaber is swinging around. So I did the same thing, but with like a loop of like tube sounds.
That's crazy.
And
the number
then
of
for
times that Shane has described what he did for a particular sound effect on the show, and we have said, Shane, that's crazy. It's a lot.
Yes.
Well, my next question was going to be like, I mean, even in a behind the scenes episode, you've mentioned just little things that you work really hard on that go unmentioned or unnoticed, that people don't know all the work that went into it. So that might be your answer, but is there something that you worked like really hard to insert into the show that you think deserves some recognition?
Yeah, so old Durf, who we've been talking about, in his first appearance, he subtly references a Dave Matthews Band song. He starts singing The Space Between, because the Force in our universe is called the Space. The space is all around us. It's yeah.
We sort of use Dave Matthews lyrics as like the ancient words
the
of
code.
Yeah, the Zima text.
the Zima, yeah.
Because the lyrics of most of his songs are completely insane. So
Yeah.
for a
And
while,
also Winston and I know Dave Matthews lyrics way too well.
yeah. So for a while, I was trying to insert Dave Matthews melodies or songs like in almost every episode in little subtle secret ways.
Instead of the Force theme, it's like ants marching.
Yeah.
It sounds dumb, but truly there is a lot of that in like seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah. But the most like time-consuming thing about the sound design is that when I came into this project, I didn't have any prior experience to doing like straight sound design stuff. I've always worked in music, and I had collected a lot of like plugins as you do that are designed for binaural sound, which is basically means like headphone specific effects that really only work if you're using headphones. And when I got the opportunity to work on this show, I thought, out of every audio only medium, podcasts are probably the medium in which people listen on headphones most, percentage wise. Like, people still listen to podcasts in cars, but in my experience, people tend to, you know, use their headphone time for podcasts. So that opens up this whole world where I sort of committed to mixing the show for headphones, which gives you this like 3D effect that you can't totally get out of listening on speakers. The drawback is that if you listen to the show on speakers, it can be slightly muddier than intended, but the benefit is that like I can place people in 3D space. Like, you can feel somebody over your shoulder. You can feel like you're inside of a cockpit for those scenes I was talking about earlier. But that's also incredibly time consuming, because if I'm gonna, it's more similar to animating than it is to straight up mixing when you do it that way, where I like am imagining a physical scene as I'm mixing, and I know where every character is and have them move around appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremy, what was it that made you want to be C-53, the protocol droid?
Well,
character?
so we when we started the show, we all sort of talked about like, oh, well, what kind of one of the things we did not improvise was like, who should we be in the first episode? 'Cause that's sort of a big ask to be like, everyone will come up with their character on the spot and the universe and everything. It's like,
Yeah.
sort of a lot of lifting. So we were like, okay, well, let's just figure out who we are, and then we'll improvise the episode. So we all sort of tended to the kinds of characters that we like. You know, in improv, you might be called upon to play any number of different characters, but I think every improviser has characters that they either like to play or are particularly good at playing. And for me, it's like and you know, this says a lot about me, but I play a lot of know-it-alls. And I also play a lot of characters who love to sort of like pick apart people's logic and jump on people's mistakes, which is frequently sort of not great improv, but when you're playing with other good improvisers can be really, really fun. And it's sort of like, if we're an ambassador team, you need that like C-3PO Data sort of character who can provide context for everything, and somehow just knows everything that's going on in the galaxy, and it just helps move the story along and like explain away stuff that might be too weird. So I pretty early on was like, oh yeah, I'm happy to do that. Like, I'm also, I would say I have a particularly good mind for like, oh, I need to make up what planet this character is from, why they do that, and this in about 3 seconds. And I would say I'm typically pretty good at that. So I
it's incredible to watch you do it in real time, like fixing the canon in real time. Like I think about episode 2 of season 4, where the guest says like, "Okay, boomer," which is obviously like a very modern, earthy thing to say, and then C-53 just jumps and he's like, "Oh yes, the boomerians, a species that is famously out of touch."
Yeah. So now it not only does it like mean the same thing that it does in our world, but it's like, oh, it has this dumb Zyxx like foundation now. I don't know what it is, but I'm getting roughed up.
This Yavin, man, there's
lack
no
of cover. Yeah.
There's no cover at all.
I better switch to something else.
Yeah, maybe I should. I'm in an X-wing now that has like all of my special stuff in it, and I am getting torched. So maybe I should switch back to the standard X-wing. But yeah, so like that for me was like, that's always sort of a comfortable place for me to improvise. So I was like, well, I might as well play that character because we need that character. But I will say, as the show has gone on, I would say, especially in like season 4, it's like C doesn't really do as much of that stuff anymore. Ooh, man, this TIE bomber just lit me up hard. So like I would say other characters now sort of feel more comfortable doing that. But I also remember when we recorded, so the second to last episode of every season, we do a special episode where we really change things up and we play totally different characters for one episode, still related to what's going on in the show, but it's very different. And in season 2, in season 2, we play the crew of the Tiny Toots, which is like, so our crew is sort of normally like the worst crew in the galaxy, and so for this episode we play like the best crew in the galaxy. And Winston plays the C-53 analog, whose name is D-20, which I thought was a very funny.
Yeah.
we recorded like 20 minutes of that episode, and we were like taking a break, and he just sort of turned to me and goes, "It is hard coming up with explanations for everything." And I was like, "Yeah, you just get used to it." But I for me, I'd been doing it so much at that point, I was like, I didn't even think about it. I was like, oh yeah, it's hard to do that part of it. But for me, it was like, well, this is sort of always what I'm doing on the show, so it didn't bug me so much.
Well, I've taken some improv lessons, and it's just listening to Zyxx and some of that stuff. It's really one of those good illustrations of like there are no wrong answers. Like
It really, it's so funny to me because, you know, I taught improv for years, and may again when you're allowed to be around other human beings. But like a lot of the stuff I will teach my students, they'll come and see me improvise and see me do the exact opposite of what I told them to do in class. And then in class, they'll be like, "Hey, why'd you do that? You immediately said no to that guy." And like, I was like, yeah, it was pretty rude, but also like it is sort of like music where like if you are playing with people you know well, then you don't need to follow any rules. You're just going to follow each other, but the rules are there so that when you like lose focus and are like, oh, this is nonsense, you just follow the rules to get back. But like if you're playing with people you trust, you can do truly ridiculous things and it'll still work.
I really need to know, and this is like the perfect team to answer this for me. What was the genesis of the Let's Party protocol? Like from just how it came up in the story to how you created it, because it's my ringtone. It makes me laugh every time.
True fan.
That's all. No, that's all Mujan, and
I thought it was.
And it also speaks to like Mujan's sort of function in the chemistry of the show. Like similar to Bargy, Mujan is like an agent of chaos in the show, and she'll often pitch the. So like, I think in that scene when the, you know, what we call a frame, so essentially the body of C-53 is first turned on, she just out of nowhere started going, let's party. And then I don't get to be in the scenes obviously, but like my way of thinking about the sound design in relationship to, you know, the rules of improv, the yes anding or whatever, is that I just like took that audio and then tried to make it into the most ridiculous little song possible. And now it's a long-running joke that every time a robot frame gets turned on, it has some variation of that song.
Yeah, I think in season 3, when C-53 starts the season working at basically an In-N-Out burger, I think it's Off and On burger, like he has a version of that song, and I think is it Fresh Patties?
It's something like that.
Yeah, it's very silly.
I'm trying. I remember the wrestling episode as well.
Oh man,
where you get introduced to go out and fight. Like anytime it pops back up, it just gets a gut busting laugh from me.
Yeah. And does the Midnight Shadow, does it say Stealth Party?
Yes.
Yeah. So like,
that's right.
I don't know why every single Ronka frame has to have that, but it really tickles me that it does.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff, which does generally come from like Mujan and sometimes Winston, are I think what helps this show from being just a straight Star Wars parody, which could be the direction we would go if we didn't have that mitigating force. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of like just throwing in wild ideas that we have to stick with. Like the fact that our spaceship, which is a sentient AI, is also a movie star for some reason.
That's a very Mujan move. Yeah, I think most great improv teams have that person who is like, as Shane said, sort of the element of chaos, or just the person who's going to like do the thing you are like, okay, we got to work that in now. But that is like important in improv so that it actually feels improvised as opposed to like, oh, because I've seen improv shows where it's like, oh, it's really smooth. It sort of feels like you wrote a show.
Yeah.
And like, that's fine, but it's not really the joy of improv. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. How has it been both like editing, doing sound design, but also recording remote for the past year? Because like I trying to still take improv lessons digitally, like it's rough. It's a lot different. So how has it been to do this show?
It was daunting at first when we had to cancel our first in-person recording session. And we did a little shuffling of the schedule to make it so we had a returning guest, somebody who really knew the world, to be our first sort of test run.
Yeah.
And that was Justin, who plays Old Durf. And for his season 4 episode, we ended up doing it over 2 recording sessions because we were ironing out the kinks. But after that, it became pretty smooth. The one benefit to it is that everyone is in a separate room, so like the
isolation is
the
great.
Isolation helps on the post-production side. Like we're not cutting out bleed as much, which is a problem in our show because some of the characters have like voice effects on them, right? So like you have to cut very close to the dialogue in order for like, you know, Plex voice to not sound like it's coming through C53's voice. And I think, what do you think, Jeremy? How did we manage to make it work? Because I think some of our best episodes ever actually were recorded during this time.
Oh, I don't think you missed a beat.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think the first couple that we recorded remotely, we were really struggling with like the delay and just feeling like, is this working at all? And like, it felt a little, you know, of like trying to do the show with your hands tied behind your back. But after, I don't know when exactly it felt like we broke through. It might be the Tordo Troopers episode, the Power Rangers episode I was talking about earlier, where it was like, oh man, this is super fun. It was something we hadn't done before, and it felt like, you know, it wasn't as fun as like, well, I would say that one was like, yeah, it was as fun as being there in person, even though we weren't. And, you know, obviously if we could have, we would have. But that was like, oh, we can still do good episodes remotely. And it really, I think, sort of reinvigorated us to, because when the pandemic started, we had talked about like, Alden was suggesting us like, well, maybe we do episodes, you know, like we'll just do a bunch of bottle episodes, or we'll do it like this, or we'll do it like that. And I was really like, I don't want to do a watered down version of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to do the show that everyone likes to listen to. And which is not to say that if we did, you know, some different version of the show that people wouldn't have enjoyed it, but it was sort of like, that doesn't interest me. I want to do the full version of the show.
Yeah.
And once we figured out how to do that, it was really great because, yeah, I think that the Tordo Troopers episode, the wrestling episode was really, really fun. It just felt like we were, you know, doing the show.
I think one thing we did process-wise was once the pandemic hit and we were recording remotely, we started doing a few more A-plot, B-plot setups. So half of the crew would be doing one thing and half of the crew would be doing something else, which helped with like the delay factor that recording online introduces, you know? So like, it's a lot harder to do a quick back and forth with a huge group of people in one scene when there's that little delay. But then when you break it down to 3 performers or 4 performers per scene, it made things a little easier to, you know, get into a rhythm with.
Yeah.
Like the wrestling episode, for example. Like,
yeah, but the wrestling episode is literally almost the full cast on both sides of the
that's true.
equation.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's later in the season, because we really figured it
We needed
out.
some time. Yeah.
You already
There's
mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Heads up, Vanguard.
I was just gonna say there's like 12 characters in, like 12 new characters in the wrestling episode, but it is very, very fun.
So you already mentioned that at the end of every season you do a special episode where you play different characters, and I think I've listened to it like 4 or 5 times. Your
thanks.
second to last episode for season 4,
Yes.
the Lord of the Rings fantasy style episode. How did
Yeah.
that come about?
That was something we've talked about doing for a while, of like, because we've back in the before times, we've met a lot of our fans, and I would say the thing that our fans want to talk to us about the most, other than the show, is like role-playing games, and like sort of the most popular podcasts among our fans. Star Wars Explained does get a lot of mentions in our Discord, but also like D&D, like real play podcasts are huge. And so we were like, it would just be fun to do this. We should find a way to like, man, no cover is rough, guys. You just feel like you're just getting eaten up, by like bugs. Sorry, I totally lost my point.
That's right.
Our fans of ours we knew they love fantasy. We knew they love like D&D stuff. So we're like, what is a fun way to like bring that into the Zyxx universe without breaking Zyxx, without being like, and we didn't want to do where like, oh, it's a planet where they don't have technology, But I love that we managed to sort of work it into the mythos of the show.
And another part of it is that when we were starting, a huge touchstone reference point is Hello from the Magic Tavern.
I just recently got into them. Well, about a year ago, someone in our improv class has told me about them, and I'm trying to catch up.
And
we lost.
we lost. Crap.
It's okay. It's okay.
Well, is it okay? Sorry, a car alarm has started to go off outside my apartment, and I apologize. Hopefully that is rectified soon. There we go. Okay, we're okay. Hello from the Magic Tavern was like, that was the show that Alden and I have known each other for we used to work together 11 years ago, and I think we knew each other even before then. But we got to be really good friends when we were on a team together that made animated videos for UCB. He mentioned Magic Tavern to me. He's like, man, if you listen to this show, Magic Tavern, it's really good. And I started listening to it, and I was like, God, this is great. And then we started to be like, we should be doing this. Like, we got all these funny friends. It's like, we can't figure out how to do this. But I think both of us lean sci-fi a little more than fantasy. Mm-hmm. I might be 50-50, but we were just like, how can we do this that's not going to feel like, we don't just want to rip off their idea. We want to take that concept of like an improvised, universe, and like, how can we lean into that even harder? And I think like Zyxx is where we ended up. We also added a lot of people into the mix. But I think the original spark for the show is like us listening to Magic Tavern and being like, God, that's good. How can we get in it?
That's one of my favorite episodes you guys have ever done.
It went over very big, and we're happy that was the case.
Okay, I have one more question. We've been going for like right about an hour, but I am curious, when you change characters like that, how much thought goes into who everyone is playing, or is that all improvised? Because like Samesies the Bard, I mean, he was named on the spot, so.
Yeah, I think we knew in that one it was like, oh, well, we want to have sort of a classic Fellowship or D&D party sort of structure. And I think I laid out the first, because in those episodes I like to play characters that are very different from C53, which is, you know, like playing Parka and Anorak in the Tiny Toots episodes, where I'm like this really hard bitten sort of Wolverine-esque kind of security officer, and then playing Quariel the Paladin in this one, who is just so humorless and hates everyone so much. I was just like, oh, paladins are one of those characters that like you sort of hate to have in your D&D group, because they have this like code of conduct, and so you're like, oh, you mean we can't steal this? And so I was like, let me play the biggest killjoy who would ever exist in a D&D campaign.
Yeah, I think for that episode, we sort of talked about it once before the recording session, where you all just sort of picked your general archetype.
Yeah.
But nothing.
It was literally just like,
the naming was on the spot, and everything else was pretty.
It was literally
open.
just like, what would our classes be? And then we were like, in we go.
Nice.
And then we sort of like the improv for an episode like that goes down several different avenues that we then back. You know, like there were versions of that episode where they all died. There were episodes where
you can hear it in the outtakes where there's a huge battle scene that essentially just got snipped out of the episode completely.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of them, it reminded me of a little secret sound thing I threw in to go back to an earlier question. 2 episodes before that one is or 3 episodes before is the Dame Wiggles episode, where the crew interacting with like this being that can sort of manipulate time and take them through time. And in this scene where the crew gets transported to like a medieval execution outside, I snuck in the sound among the crowd. You can hear Quariel walk by and doing one of his prayers.
Oh, really?
Oh my God.
Wow, I didn't know
implying that they went to that universe.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's so good. Quariel's prayers, like, I don't know how you
So
do that.
funny.
Like,
I literally just like, I think I Googled like prayer generator or something, and I just got like 1 or 2 so that he could immediately like have something to say when he went into that. And after I did 1 or 2, I was like, oh, I can improvise this all day. It's like they all have the exact same structure, where it's just like, you know, like, well, forgive me, Rhodas, for my transgressions against your divine nature. May you burn the skin from my body if I am to drop your glorious goblet full of life again. You know, it's like, it's just, once you get into the mode of it, it's very easy.
well, we've been going for right at an hour. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I have to ask, how's season 5 going?
We just had our first big planning meeting for season 5, and we always go into the planning meeting being like, okay, you know, like, let's keep an open mind. It's like sometimes we end up just going in circles for hours and hours over like, oh, but we kind of did that last season. And this one, fairly early on, we struck on something we liked, and by the end of it, we were just like yeah, like, yeah. We were feeling really good about it.
Yeah, it felt like we all are sort of more than even previous seasons, like more on the same page as to like where we want to take it. So we're excited about it.
That's awesome.
I think we're hyped to get into it. I hope fans enjoy it, but I think that they will.
Any proposed release for the premiere?
Probably we tend to have our premiere come out around the time of the Max Fun Drive. The network that our podcast is on is Maximum Fun, and usually around March, April is when they do that, and we tend to have the release coincide with that. So we're thinking early,
probably somewhere in that window of late March, early April, barring any outside factors. I think probably we'll be able to hit that.
Perfect. I can't wait. Where can people listen to Mission to Zyxx, follow Mission to Zyxx, and follow both of you?
Well, Mission to Zyxx is everywhere podcasts are sold, which is nowhere. But anywhere podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, all these, or you can go to missiontozyxx.space and listen there. And of course, we would be remiss to not mention, you can also find us at our wonderful friends at Maximum Fun. We are there as soon as we start releasing season 5. You will find us there all the darn time. You can find me on social media. I'm Jeremy M. Bent at Twitter and Instagram, or you can find me at Zyxx C53 is my account for my character C53. If you want to ask in universe questions, he's happy to answer. Yeah,
and I'm also on Twitter if you want to ask sound design questions under O'Connellism. Yeah. Great. And then you follow Mission to Zyxx on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're also there.
I'll put links to everything in the description of this video. And I'll again, seriously, my favorite podcast. I'm thrilled to get to talk to you guys for a little bit. Thanks for taking some time to talk with all of us. Thanks for having us.
This was so
Alex,
fun.
we're delighted. We're sorry we let you down in that last fleet battle.
Well, the Empire has to strike back sometimes. That's okay.
That is true.
And last April, your April Fool's episode on Star Wars Explained was such...
What a treat. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed that.
We very much.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.